Joining us to discuss the latest on NATO and President Trump's announcement pledging to send Patriot missiles and more for Ukraine, with European allies expected to finance the purchases and then transfer the arms to Ukraine. We have Army veteran and political commentator Keith Gross. Keith, good to have you with us today. This announcement marks a departure from Trump's earlier insistence on providing only defensive aid, though these seem to be primarily defensive weapons that have been pledged. What's your initial reaction?
Well, I don't think the president's position on NATO has changed. I think for a long time he's wanted burden sharing. He believes in the NATO alliance, but only to the extent it is upheld by other nations and not solely the United States.
Okay, as we've heard, President Trump said he'll introduce very severe secondary tariffs of 100% if no ceasefire deal is reached with Ukraine within 50 days. There's been debate, though, over what impact more sanctions could really have in this whole process of trying to end this war, considering that Russia's getting support from China and other nations. But also, as Trump mentioned today, Russia's economy is already in trouble. So how do you assess the potential for sanctions to instigate a turning point in this war?
I think at this point, largely, the additional sanctions proposed would be symbolic for a handful of reasons. As you pointed out, there is a lot of support from other nations flowing to Russia right now. Perhaps the most effective thing would be to get those other nations on board with the idea that one country can't invade another sovereign country. If those other countries would cooperate, it would be far more effective than the United States trying to force these sanctions into efficacy all by themselves. But that's not what we've seen. We've already put so many sanctions on Russia from the United States side that we do very little business with them at all already. So there's not really a lot of ongoing business that we can attach tariffs to.
Okay, so we'll watch this space because these potential sanctions are secondary, as we've been saying. So that would apply to other nations and potentially have a bigger impact. But in Russia, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said it's very important that talks over Ukraine continue. How do you see such a comment at this time?
It looks like they're buying time. If they really wanted to have a serious conversation about the invasion into Ukraine, they would have done it a long time ago. They would have pulled back. And I think that's likely what's emboldened the United States to continue the support of the Ukrainian conflict by providing weapons to NATO, which will likely be distributed via NATO to Ukraine and back up the conflict here. So if we thought that Russia really wanted to end this, they could do it with one phone call. They haven't done that. So I understand why President Trump would be very frustrated. I think all Americans are annoyed with this.
Now, considering that Russia's getting weapons from China and Iran, which both have their own domestic troubles, yet also have a shared goal to challenge the global order, how do you see their supply of weapons to Russia compared with what's been pledged so far from NATO allies to Ukraine?
Look, there's no doubt that NATO allies, and particularly the United States, can provide more firepower, more weapons, more consistent resolve, financial backing, etc., than Russia and its unlikely new friends. You know, of the list of folks providing help to Russia, that's not a very good list of countries to be a member of if you're Russia. It's a pretty bad look for them. It's also North Korea. It seems like they've picked all of the malcontents around the world and decided to align themselves with those people instead of with the West, who they've done business with for years and have generally had good relations. It's a little disconcerting to see that sort of turn for Russia.
Now, this war has been going on for more than 3 years. Is there anything missing from the conversation at this point that you think needs to be highlighted?
You know, I think everyone focuses on the back and forth between these two nations, but really it is a broader conflict. This is really more about NATO's expansion. NATO's potential annexation of Ukraine originally seems to be one of the key triggers that caused Russia to perform this invasion in the first place. I think we need to have a clear conversation on a global scale where we can reset what boundaries are acceptable and ensure that these sorts of conflicts don't arise in the future.
And what will you be watching for next on this front?
Really, the ball's in Russia's court. President Trump has sent a very clear signal. He's made it very clear what he wants out of President Putin of Russia. And the ball's in their court. If they want to stop this, they can do that tomorrow. If they continue invading a sovereign nation, I don't see the United States turning a blind eye to that. We don't want to spend the money and deploy the resources to back up some other nation's conflict, but we're not going to sit idly by and watch a sovereign nation be dissolved by its neighbor.
Now, Trump, during the press conference earlier today, declined to say, when asked how far he would go if these tactics didn't work with Russia. He did say he thinks Europe and or Germany are willing to go very far for Ukraine. But when we're looking at these negotiations and the potential for it to head in many different directions, is there anything that's giving you hope at this time, just to finish up?
Not particularly. Russia has not made any serious move, and they're really dragging the world to the precipice of serious conflict and great danger. When you get multiple nuclear-armed countries involved in a conflict, things can spiral out of control quickly. And this is because of Russia's actions. They need to pull back. They need to stop this and ensure that things don't get further out of control.
All right, a sober look at high-stakes events happening right now as we speak. Thank you so much for your time today, Keith Gross. Good to have you on.
Thanks.